Tiny puppy doesn't leave elderly's side after he saved them. Most people believe heroes wear capes. But sometimes they wear old flannel shirts, their hands are wrinkled from time, and their hearts still carry the weight of people they've lost. Sometimes they live quietly in forgotten towns, where the only sound at night is the whisper of the wind and the creak of an old rocking chair. And sometimes the ones they save aren't people at all. They're helpless, soaking wet, tossed by a river's rage, just a heartbeat away from never being found. This is the story of a tiny puppy, barely breathing, and the elderly man who risked his life to pull him from death's grip. But what happened after that rescue, what came next, is the kind of loyalty, love, and healing that can only be called a miracle. Because when you save a life, sometimes it saves you right back. Earl Thompson was 78 years old, a retired railway worker living in a small cabin near the outskirts of Willow Creek. After his wife passed away 5 winters ago, silence became his only companion. His days were filled with lukewarm tea, worn-out books, and memories wrapped in the scent of her lavender perfume. Every morning, he'd take his usual walk along the riverbank, where he once courted his beloved Margaret. The river was like him, steady, slow-moving, with years etched into its flow. But one morning, something broke the calm. It was a sharp, desperate yelp, a sound that sliced through the morning mist like a cry for help. Earl squinted, shuffled closer, and saw it, a tiny brown puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread, tumbling in the current, its tiny paws flailing helplessly as the water dragged it under again and again. Without thinking, the old man dropped his cane and coat. Despite his aching knees and weak lungs, Earl dove into that cold, rushing water. For a moment, the current almost took him too, but he pushed forward, driven by nothing but pure instinct. He grabbed the puppy, who was nearly limp, its eyes barely open. Earl swam back with everything he had left in his body. Laying the pup on the muddy shore, Earl wrapped him in his flannel shirt. The little one wasn't breathing properly, his chest rose and fell like flickering candlelight. "Oh no you don't, little buddy," Earl murmured, voice trembling. "You fight now, you ain't done yet." He rubbed the puppy with his warmest towel, whispering prayers and stories, just like he used to do for his kids when they were sick. He warmed up goat's milk, spoon-fed it gently, and stayed up all night watching that tiny chest rise and fall. And when the fever came, Earl was there with damp cloths. When the shivers wouldn't stop, he lit the fireplace, cradled the pup in his arms, and held him close. "He's not just a dog," Earl told his neighbor a few days later, "he's a miracle." Days turned into weeks. And like a sunrise after a long, cold night, life slowly began to bloom again. The puppy, whom Earl named Buddy, was no longer just a bundle of damp fur and fragile breath. He was healing. Little by little, his tiny legs gained strength, and soon he was waddling across Earl's old wooden floor, his paws clicking softly against the planks, his nose twitching at every new smell, every creak, every shadow of the man who saved him. Buddy had the kind of wide-eyed wonder only found in beings who've known the edge of death and been given another chance. He nibbled Earl's shoelaces. He tugged at the corner of his flannel robe with playful growls. And every night, without fail, he'd curl up at the foot of Earl's bed, curled like a comma in a sentence that suddenly made sense again. But it wasn't just Buddy who was healing. Earl, too, began to come alive in a way he hadn't in years. Since Margaret passed, the house had been filled with a silence so loud it echoed. Meals were often skipped. Curtains remained drawn. Even the clock on the wall seemed tired of ticking for no one. But now there was motion. Warmth. A rhythm. Mornings were for feeding Buddy and talking to him like he was a grandchild who somehow understood every word. Afternoons were for slow walks around the garden, where Buddy would chase bees he could never catch and bark at dandelions as if they were daring him to play. Sometimes, Earl would find himself laughing at the sheer absurd joy of it. One morning, after weeks of nursing, caring, and watching Buddy grow stronger, Earl stood by the screen door and opened it wide. "All right now," he said gently, "you're free, little one. Go on. The world's yours now." The yard stretched out with grass waving gently in the breeze. Birds called from branches. The sun was golden. Buddy stepped forward, then stopped. He turned his tiny head and looked up at Earl. Not with confusion. Not with fear. But with understanding. With choice. And then he sat down. He gave a single, short bark, more like a whisper than a command, and laid down right there on the porch, pressing his body against Earl's slipper like it was home. Earl's eyes filled with tears. "You're really not going, are you?" he said softly, his voice catching. "Not now. Not ever." Buddy didn't move. He'd made his choice. That porch, that man, that quiet cabin by the river. They were his whole world now. Because when someone pulls you from the dark, warms you back to life, and teaches you love again, you don't walk away. You stay. And from that day forward, Buddy never left Earl's side. He was there when Earl read the morning paper. There when he brewed his tea. There, curled beside him by the fire on winter nights, breathing in sync, like two hearts sharing one rhythm. They were healing together. Two souls, one battered by age and grief, the other by fear and cold. Knitted together not by blood, but by something stronger. By rescue. By trust. By love. Since that day, Buddy became Earl's constant companion. He followed him to the market, napped beside his rocking chair, and even guarded the bathroom door like a soldier on duty. "He doesn't even bark at squirrels," Earl chuckled one day. "He just watches me, like he's making sure I'm okay." And truth be told, Buddy was doing exactly that. When Earl had a bad cough one night and nearly fainted reaching for his medication, it was Buddy's loud, frantic barking that drew the neighbors. They called for help just in time. "He saved my life that night," Earl whispered later. "I saved his once. He returned the favor." Word spread through the quiet town. "Tiny puppy never leaves elderly man's side after rescue," read the local paper. People stopped by more often, curious about the bond between man and pup. Some even brought treats for Buddy, but he always stayed close to Earl, guarding him with the silent loyalty only dogs possess. Veterinarians confirmed what the town already knew: Buddy's attachment wasn't ordinary. He's displaying what's known as deep emotional imprinting, one vet explained. In cases of rescue, especially where survival is uncertain, dogs can bond for life. Earl once told his grandson during a rare visit, "When your grandma passed, I thought I'd never feel whole again." But then came Buddy, and somehow his tiny heartbeat filled the silence. The two of them, man and dog, started a new rhythm together. Morning walks became moments of joy. Winter nights were no longer so cold. Earl even began attending town socials again, with Buddy in tow. People said he smiled more, laughed more, lived more. The once lonely cabin at the edge of Willow Creek now echoed with life. Stories like this are rare, but they remind us of the healing power of love and how sometimes it comes with 4 legs and a wet nose. So many viewers search for heartwarming pet rescue stories or emotional dog loyalty tales, and this one. It lives up to every word. Yes, dog never leaves man's side after rescue might sound like a headline, but for Earl and Buddy, it's simply life. And perhaps that's the most beautiful part. Today, if you visit Willow Creek and take a walk by the river, you'll likely see an old man sitting on a bench, throwing pebbles into the water. Beside him, always, is a now-grown Buddy, eyes watching every move. They sit in silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because everything that needs saying is already understood. They are proof that love knows no age, and that sometimes, rescuing another life, saves your own. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below if you've ever experienced a bond like this, because stories of emotional dog loyalty and pet rescue miracles deserve to be told. For more real-life stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit the bell icon and join our growing family. Because here, we believe every soul, man or beast, deserves a second chance.